Richardson gave up day-to-day control of the Panthers in December after an investigation into alleged workplace misconduct. The allegations included Richardson inappropriately touching female employees and making sexual and racial comments. Texas owner Bob McNair was asked about Richardson and told Jarrett Bell of USA Today, quote, "Some of the comments could have been made jokingly. I'm sure he didn't mean to offend anybody." Shannon, do you have a problem with this?
Hell yeah, I got a real problem with this. And you know, Skip, I used to hold Mr. McNair in very, very high regards. Rick Smith, who's a very good friend of mine, I've known Rick Smith, the former general manager, for over 20 years. Mr. McNair gave Rick an opportunity to be a general manager, a person of color, a job in this position when very few had that title. I think at the time, only Ozzie Newsome had the capacity could say he's an African-American general manager of an NFL football team. But then as this protest started going, and I started to hear him talk, say, if you listen at a person talk, they'll tell you exactly who they are. When he said, we can't have the prisoners running the asylum. Well, theoretically, that's not the phrase. It was, we can't have the inmates running the asylum. But the mere fact that
prison.
Go ahead.
No, it's prison. He said inmates
running
the
prison.
Yeah.
The mere fact that he would utter and he could see a parallel between guys kneeling for the anthem in protest of police brutality as prisoners and the asylum as the NFL, for him to draw that parallel, it kind of soured me on him.
Sure.
And then the more he started to talk, now he's saying maybe he didn't mean to offend. I need people to understand. You do not get to determine what is offensive. It's only the people that's being offended that gets to determine that. A la Mr. Snyder and that Native American symbol on the side of his helmet. You don't get to say it's a badge of courage because you're not that. We don't get to tell Jewish people what's offensive to them, do we? They won't allow it. But, no, Mr. McNair. And you talking about, you know, if he'd have thought about it, he might have should have fought. No, it's not the time to fight now. He should have fought when they alleged these allegations instead of paying it off and then signing NDAs, Non-Disclosure Act. Because if you're so sure, if you 100% for certain that your guy's on the up and up and he's such a good guy, tell him he can tell these women that they can go speak publicly and they can nullify the non-disclosure. Tell him to do that because he Skip, this is not a one-off. When he was the head of, I think it was Hardee's and Denny's, he settled a racial bias claim to the tune of, I think, $46 to $54 million. Now he had to settle another racial claim with a scout in the very department. Now he has these, I guess you can't call them allegations. If you settle, there has to be some truth to them because why else would you have settled? Here's the thing, Skip. If none of this was true, why in the hell Mr. Richardson fought so hard to get think about it. He got a sports franchise in Charlotte, North Carolina. And you know what, Skip? A lot of writers are keeping Paul Tagliabue out of the NFL because he gave Jacksonville Hall of Fame. They're keeping Paul Tagliabue out of the Hall of Fame because he gave Charlotte and Jacksonville franchises before he put one back in L.A. And they hold that against him. Bob McNair, do you realize what you're saying? Now, here's the thing. And I've been asked, well, how do you think players are going to respond to this? Players are going to take that man's money and go sign there and say, well, he wasn't talking to me. Because how many NBA players signed with the Clippers when they knew Donald Sterling's background and his history with race? Because guess what, Skip? My grandfather used to say, boy, anything can be bought can damn sure be sold. And we know people will sell their integrity. They'll sell their very worth for a high enough dollar. So they will take this man's money, knowing how he feels, not only about them. I don't know if you've noticed, Mr. McNair, but there's something going on. And it's called Me Too. And it's not a situation where if you got a car, they got one too. You got a fur coat, they got one too. It's about women and some men dealing with sexual assault or harassment on the job. That's what Mr. Richardson signed and paid these people off. That's why he did it. I get he's your friend. But you can never, ever make it seem like you side with him over these women talking about, well, maybe he didn't mean to offend them. Huh? Where? And you thought that was okay? Skip, I keep telling you, it doesn't bother me what people say publicly. If he said that publicly, what in the hell do you think he's saying privately? I can't. Sometimes it defies logic. Sometimes that we think smart people or rich people say some of the dumbest things. But for him to go public and say about what is alleged Mr. Richardson did, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Skip, because I know you got some very interesting points. Mr. Richardson wasn't even thinking about selling this franchise or his stake in the franchise until Sports Illustrated came. Sports Illustrated broke the story on Friday. Friday, Saturday, late Sunday night, Mr. Richardson said he's putting his shares up for sale. Why in the hell would someone that fought so hard to get a franchise in Charlotte, North Carolina, put a team up for sale 2 days after this story broke? We know why.
Yeah.
And for you to defend him is abhorrent.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Sports Illustrated not only broke the story, they broke him down.
Yeah.
To the bottom. He had no exit except exit strategy. So here's my bottom line on what we just heard from Bob McNair. Here we had one 80-year-old white clueless billionaire, Bob McNair, talking about another 81-year-old white clueless billionaire team owner in Jerry Richardson. That's how I boil this down.
Right.
And they are both completely prehistorically clueless on all matters that really matter now, today, to the National Football League. And it would serve this league well if they could somehow place a gag order on most of their owners, if not all of them, because every time they open their mouths, they don't just insert foot, they insert it down their throat because they're killing the popularity and the saleability of their league every time they open their mouths, because they continue to expose their prehistoric mindset when it comes to the treatment and abuse of women and the plight of black America as it pertains to their black employees, their players, protesting during the anthem. Why is that? Well, we don't know. They can't do that to the flag.
It's the flag. It's the country.
It's the flag. It's the flag. And by the way, speaking of that, Bob McNair then went a step further in Jarrett Bell's piece. He says, this is Bob McNair, our playing field, that's not the place for political statements, not the place for religious statements. Oh, so now we're opening that can of worms also. So it's not okay for a player to do this when he scores, or for the FCA group, the Bible study, to kneel together from both teams after the game? I don't know. I guess that's over also.
Yeah, most teams pray before and after the game. So is that out?
I guess
so. When we in attendance and we have a moment of silence, is that going to be out? You see, Mr. McNair, every time you open your mouth, I see a toe pop out because your foot's in your mouth. And you won't stop because he's bringing up things, and I'm sure Roger Goodell's commish skin is crawling. He's like, why would you go here? Why would you say that? For you to come to the defense of a man that settled sexual harassment situations, for you to defend his behavior is unacceptable, Mr. McNair.
Yeah, and to your point, he says, I'm sure Jerry didn't mean to offend. Well, it's because he's not even aware of how out of bounds his behavior and comments are. That's the problem.
You know why?
Not even aware.
Because when you're wealthy and white, you don't think rules are applicable to you.
I guess so.
He's like, I can do, hey, I'm Jerry. I got all, you work for me. So, a lot of times, Skip, people like when you work for someone, that people think they own you. Well, because what did Donald Sterling say? I buy them homes, I buy them clothes, no, you don't. No, you don't. They're providing a service.
They are.
And so this goes to the thinking, the greater thinking of how a lot of these men think. But for him to come, Skip, look, for him to come to the defense, and I know there's some people in our path that have done some things that we're not proud of. And maybe in behind closed doors is one thing. But to say that publicly, Skip, nothing can come out of that. Because if you defend them publicly,
Yep.
you're almost saying the victims are lying.
Correct.
And you take his word over their words.
Well, I would go so far as to think he doesn't even think that they're victims.
No.
I don't like to
That's
use the
probably
word
true.
clueless, but the only way you can logically explain this is that they are actually clueless.
Both.
But the reason that he feels comfortable saying this is the reason that these environments exist in the
Yes.
first place,
And it
because
makes
they
you
make
wonder,
excuses for what happens.
You wonder about his environment with the Texans.
Well, how can of course you. I mean, you certainly can't take his apology about the prison comments seriously. When
Yeah.
you're out here defending all of this other stuff.
Yeah, most of these guys, birds of a feather,
Yep.
flock together.
Well, that's
You've
why
never-
diversity is important. When you
You've
have
never
all the
seen-
same people in the same room telling each other they're right all the time, that's what happens.
You ever
Up
seen
next,
Steve with
he's
the pigeons hanging?
in the 19th season in the NBA. Bucks guard and NBA
Oh, here we
champion
go.
Jason Terry